And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Good afternoon. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist John Cowen with your marine forecast. We'll start off taking a look at sea ice across our offshore areas. You can see the Chukchi Sea is mostly filled in at this point. Ice continues to build south towards the Bering Strait. And high pressure over northern Alaska is really going to lock in that cold air, so we do expect ice to continue to build south and those cold temperatures to stay in place. However, over the southern half of the state, we do have a much more active pattern. We have a low pressure system here south of the Panhandle. That's going to be moving north over the next couple of days, bringing rain and snow to much of the Panhandle, starting off as snow. So by Saturday, we still have some pretty gusty winds across much of southeastern Alaska, pretty heavy snow as well. Across the area, and that'll continue moving north into Sunday, where we are in full atmospheric river mode by Sunday afternoon. Plenty of heavy rain getting pumped up into the southern portions of the Panhandle. Still hanging on to the snow in the northern portions, but gusty winds do continue broadly across much of the Panhandle and northern Gulf region. Mixed wintry precipitation as well across the eastern Aleutians, and mostly rain as we get towards the western Aleutians with more mild temperatures in that area. Areas of the southeastern Bering dealing with some unsettled weather as well. I'm taking a look at our marine forecast for Saturday across the Panhandle. Winds are generally going to be about 25 to 30 knots out of the north to northeast. Seas offshore areas looking at 8 to 12 feet in those areas, 4 to 6 feet from Skagway down to Petersburg and Ketchikan. By Sunday, we're looking at winds increasing out of the east about 40 knots or so in the offshore areas. Again, looking at 8 to 12 feet for most of those areas. Skagway to Petersburg, Ketchikan, again, winds increasing to about 25 to 35 knots and seas up 5 to 7 feet, even 13 feet in the southern portions of the Panhandle. And then taking a look at the northern Gulf Coast, you can see Saturday, things generally pretty benign. Winds about 15 knots out of the northeast or so in the northern Cook Inlet, increasing to about 25 over the southern portions of Cook Inlet. Seas generally 3 to 5 feet. Offshore areas south of Prince William Sound, winds around 20 knots out of the east to northeast, and seas about 5 to 8 feet. And then by Sunday, we start to see the increase in winds in these offshore areas. Winds generally out of the east around 30 knots, seas increasing up to about 12 feet. Winds increasing also across the Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound as well, up to about 20 knots, seas increasing to about 5 feet, and then south of Kenai up to about 9 feet. And then taking a look at southwestern Alaska, or the eastern Aleutians, you can see that we have the strong winds on the Pacific side. Again, much higher sea state over here with seas around 10 feet or so. On the Bering side, we're looking at about 25 knots, but seas only about 3 to 5 feet for that area. Getting into Sunday, things generally decreasing from the south across south of Sand Point. 30 knots still out of the north, though, with sheltering, kind of helping out that sea state, about 5 to 7 feet in that area. Kodiak Island seeing the stronger winds on Sunday, 35 up to 40 knots out of the northeast, so looking at seas around 12 to 14 feet in that area. And then across the central Aleutians, we do have an area of stronger winds here, 25 knots or so north of Cold Bay with seas up to about 8 to 9 feet. And then across the western Aleutians, we're looking at, again, generally calmer weather for Saturday, winds around 25 knots or so, seas up to about 8 feet. By Sunday, increasing to about 30 with that core of stronger winds moving through the area, seas 12 to 15 feet for most areas. And then coming across to the west coast, again, sea ice has thickened pretty substantially across much of the immediate coast, but winds generally about 20 to 25 knots out of the northeast, carrying that cold air down from the interior. Seas around 2 to 3 feet for most areas. Same story Sunday, however, we do have that stronger core of winds in the offshore areas increasing to around 30 knots with seas 8 to 15 feet even for some areas getting close to St. Paul. And then for the North Slope, again, most of these areas are ice covered, winds generally 15 to 25 knots or so. Same story for Sunday, generally offshore flow, 10 to 15 knots for most areas. And that'll wrap up our marine forecast. I'm meteorologist John Cowen.